I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski and my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk episode 1000. It's another milestone episode. Jerry Lacey narrates this opening. Uh, Keep in mind, we're in 1970 parallel time here. Barnabas is in a chain coffin because of William Hollinshead Loomis, writer, who wrote the life and death of Barnabas Collins, but not our Barnabas, the parallel time Barnabas. And so he's in a chain coffin, and we get this episode isn't about Barnabas. It is about Alexis, who is Angelique's twin sister. Laura Parker's pulling double duty in a sense here. You have a very interesting situation in this episode because Jerry Lacey is fearing a ghost in the house, so he's suspicious. I love how Amy walks in, and Jerry Lacey's just like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the Loomis house. You're supposed to be at the old house." And he's like, "You need to go back." And when he's like manhandling her, Quentin walks in. He goes, "Have you lost your head?" And Jerry Lacey does his best, even though he's not Reverend Trask. He does his best Reverend Trask. He's playing a Trask, to be clear. He does his best Reverend Trask and going, "I sense evil in this house." And it's because Jerry Lacey he's the butler of the Collins family. It's really cool to see Jerry Lacey, a Trask, serving the Collins family.
Sure.
Quentin is in between, calm and psychotic in this episode, which I love. He's
the laziest.
Yeah. The scenes in the cemetery between him, Christopher Pennock, Laura Parker are really gold. What did you guys think of this episode, Gordon?
Well, I thought it was a very. I think this is one of the episodes that I think you see that the writers now that they know what they're doing, it's become effortless at this point because they're balancing so much information. I will say that there was a detail in that episode that I had misremembered, which is that I always thought that William Loomis was writing basically like a fictionalized version of of a vampire with Barnabas in the coffin. And when he said, when Quentin reads the pages about the truth about Barnabas Collins, I'm thinking, wait, dude, if you wrote a biography, that meant you had to do research and find facts. I mean, even if all you did was just copy the same article out of Encyclopedia Britannica over and over, but you're actually thinking that having a vampire tell the truth about, like, and the thing is, like, if there's I think in this storyline, it said that parallel time Barnabas Collins had 4 sons, and it's like, okay, dude, you're really gonna go there, and it's proof that in any timeline, Willie Loomis is an idiot.
Yes.
And he's like, yeah, in any timeline, no matter what, the guy. I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. He's a few dimes short of a dollar.
He's oatmeal north of the eyebrows.
Right, oatmeal north of the eyebrows. But no, I think that the scene with Trask, it is also really good because you kind of get the sense that maybe that with we haven't had a decent like servant since Mrs. Johnson eons ago, and I think it kind of shows that in our time it seems like the Trasks are kind of you could see the show going in the direction of it's the Collins versus the Trask, and then you got Richard Dawson, 100 people surveyed, he's going around kissing the women. Like, you could see that as a Dark Shadows thing. Here, it makes it clear that the Trask family in parallel time is like, they're not really a threat. I mean, it's basically, they're just the hired help. But I think the scenes with Angelique and Alexis, those are the real key, because it really, that whole kind of, is Angelique dead or alive? Because they're doing the Rebecca thing. Quentin comes home with Maggie. It's hinted that he still has feelings for his wife. Everyone else is fascinated with her. And I like how it goes from, okay, Why is she perfectly preserved? To Alexis telling her, we're going to have to destroy your body. Angelique wakes up and says, "Oh yeah, we'll get rid of someone, but it ain't going to be me. It's going to be you."
Yeah.
Yes.
And to be clear, Alexis earlier in the episode is against destroying the body, and then she, when she goes back to the house, the realization she wants to go back to the mausoleum. She's coming to that realization that Quentin's right. The body needs to be destroyed. And
yes, precisely.
When she tells her sister, like Gordon said, she opens her eyes. It's like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. Go ahead, Patrick. What did you think about this?
Exactly. Right, navigating through a backyard with a lot of with a dog who has a very active colon that lives next door. So, you were saying?
What did you think about the episode?
I think it's a show about a vampire. I thought the episode was very good. I thought it's like, for one thing, something happens. It's not just suspense, it's action. And so I was happy to see that. I think that was a good thing. And beyond that, I like the surreality of the two Laura Parkers. I enjoy the cliffhanger a lot because I feel like, as Gordon said, yeah, they're finally firing on all cylinders, and it really is one of the most shocking and disturbing cliffhangers the show had. So for those things, I think it works really well. I think it packed in a lot into a short period of time. So I appreciate that about it.
Here's a question for you guys. With how sort of psychotic Quentin can be during the 1970 parallel time arc, is it easy to sort of point the finger at him for Angelique's death?
Like the original Angel, like his wife Angelique?
Yeah, for his wife. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, no. Do you think if he had been less negligent, she would have been alive, or if he had been more observant, she'd be alive?
Well, in a sense, in my view, this Quentin, the parallel time Quentin, is the OG Jack Torrance. At least to me, he's the inspiration for Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
He's violent. He drinks, and he has violent outbursts for almost no reason. And it's easy to me when I always go back and watch this arc, and I think the writers are doing this on purpose to sort of like fool the audience, and David Selby does a great job too playing the part. That it's easy to point the finger. It's all too easy to point the finger at Quentin for the murder of his wife. I mean, you could tell he hated Angelique.
Sure.
I
mean, she's cheating on him with half a Collinsport. He has a reason to have issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also wonder, though, is his reaction to her because is his kind of like abusive tendencies towards her because she's cheating, or is she cheating because of that personality? Because Angelique in parallel time, well, Angelique in any timeline, but especially in parallel time, does not seem like the kind of woman you want to mess with. Like she seems like if you tried to with her, she would threaten, you raise your hand at me, you'll pull back a bloody stump. Like she seems like someone you do not want to mess with. So I can easily see that it's less, she's the one instigating his behavior. I think this Quentin has always been abusive, but she was doing a lot of the affairs in that because, hey, look, what's she going to do? Like, it's either deal with this jerk or have a little fun. And I'm pro having fun.
Yeah, she flirted around with Bruno, with Roger. I mean,
Amy, maybe Trash, maybe, yeah. I mean, a lot of people. Cyrus, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy to see, like, people would be infatuated with Angelique. And she's very charming. And here's Quentin, who's this angry husband all the time. It's like, dude, she's just flirting. Like, but when he moves on with Maggie, he talks about how he felt so happy, when it was just the two of them. And you don't really hear about that with him and Angelique. It's just like he's glad she's gone. He's glad she's gone. So when they talk about her murder, that she was murdered during the seance, Cyrus Longworth, believes that it was Quentin, or at least he thinks it was. And it's like, it sort of is easy to think that it may have been Quentin. But I think the writers and David Selby do a good job of misleading you in who it really is or isn't. Because when you have a violent character, I've talked about this with, they say about Roger was always meant to be a more of a cold-blooded killer. Here's the thing, David Selby's Quentin in 1970, I could see him murdering his wife. I could see why people would think he would murder his wife. He's very violent. Hell, he's violent toward Maggie, and Maggie's not a witch. Maggie doesn't know witchcraft. Maggie's not trying to flirt around with anybody. And so there's a moment when it's not in this episode. It's a couple episodes later. It's the episode after Barnabas gets out of his coffin, where David Selby's Quentin Collins has a cup. And he goes, I'll get answers out of William Loomis if I have to strangle him out of it. He just throws the cup and it breaks.
Wait, athletic cup. What sort of cup are you talking about?
It's a I think it's like it's a wine glass or something. It's probably a frosted cup. In Dark Shadows, but so when he leaves and goes over, he's grabbing Willie Loomis, he's shaking him. He looks like he's gonna choke him until Barnabas says, "Oh, I'm interested in this too." And then Quentin turns like, "Holy shit, yeah, you look like that other guy." And then there's a whole conversation between them two, and Quentin calms down. It's like you could see why Quentin is sort of suspect number one in the death of Angelique.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I rambled there.
Anyone would think anything else. What do you think would have happened in this universe had Barnabas not intervened?
Oh, shit.
I think there would have been a second grave next to Angelique's, with Maggie Collins.
Oh yeah,
because I think when you look at the pattern of abusers, they tend to go for people who are more willing to be compliant, who won't necessarily set boundaries. It's like with Angelique, maybe she took it to an extreme, but you could see where, if they have this dynamic of he's trying to control her and she's going out and sneaking out, her affairs are a way for her to tell Quentin, you're not going to control me. I don't get the sense with Parallel Time Maggie that she necessarily had the ability to do that. So I could see Quentin really pushing it to the point where maybe it's an accident, maybe it's deliberate, but I really don't, and it may be a while, but I don't think she's going to, without Barnabas, because at least, even if it's just that his presence there means the potential of another set of eyes, I think she would have ended up dead.
Intention is that Quentin is the real monster in this story. That's something that has a sniff test on this or not?
Yeah, it
Yes.
does. I think that too, even though he is the real monster, I think Maggie, and a lot of the Collins family members end up dead, and Angelique wins overall. Angelique would have got her revenge, if you will. And I think you would have had the Angelique, her father living at Collinwood, running the business, they would have raised David. Now your father was, to be clear, they would have made Quentin go mad and kill everybody other than David. David would have been their witness that his father went nuts. This would have been The Shining in reverse, where she puts Quentin under a spell and has him kill everybody with an axe. And then he gets arrested, and then they put him on, they execute him for killing his family.
Stokes pulling the strings in all of this.
I liked it. I think it was something so different, and being Angelique's father was just a cherry on top.
Do you think he is? How much of this has set up ahead of time?
I think he had, well, to his own admission, he had her death. He had her being resurrected from death set up ahead of time. That's why she never feared it. She always knew she could be brought back and her father would be the one to do it. And his own admission that he wasn't sure it would work, even though it did with the creation of Alexis. And this is why he hates Alexis. He wants nothing to do with her. Alexis feels the same way.
Are we, and maybe this was made here, because I don't quite remember. I like all of Dark, like some parts more than others. Parallel Time. Has Angelique been getting out of the coffin and doing things, or is she awakened by Alexis's presence?
I don't think she's out of the coffin at any point, because the whole lead up is people keep going, "Oh, Alexis, you're Angelique." No, I'm Alexis. So I think it's Alexis being there. And I think there's a kind of almost eerie parallel between the Angelique Alexis storyline and the Longworth John Yeager storyline. I don't think they quite overlap, but you kind of see this exploration of like what happens when you split good and evil.
I think too, the reason there's stuff going on in the house, I think there's a lot of elements. There's Julia Hoffman, who's on Angelique's side, who's sort of stoking the flames of the paranoia happening around the house. And everybody in this house, especially 1970 parallel time, is just naturally paranoid. Quentin, Cyrus Longworth is less paranoid, but again, I'll get into why. But Jerry Lacey's character, David Collins, Amy, the kids are naturally going to be scared. They're going to naturally be paranoid. They're kids. And then you have Maggie, who's just the icing on the cake of the paranoia, because especially when she sees Alexis, because that doesn't help matters at all. And you have, again, this is where you have Julia Hoffman having Alexis wear Angelique's clothes. It's just like, Jesus Christ. To me, the reason Cyrus Longworth is sort of the less paranoid of the bunch is because, again, he's a man of science. So he doesn't, although he studies the occult, he's not a true believer in the occult. I've talked about, you can be a doubting Thomas or you can be a full-blown doubting Thomas. Even though you may dabble in the occult, it might not necessarily mean you actually believe in the thing you're studying or dabbling in. Where there are such things as true believers, if you're not a true believer of the occult, I suggest you maybe, especially in Dark Shadows Land, start looking into it and actually being a believer, because shit tends to happen.
That sounds like a threatening Baptist.
Yeah.
It really did.
I'm with Patrick on this.
Yeah. That was like, well, you better start going to church, boy. Or have some potato salad.
Yeah, it means Catholics are better at the like guilt and peer pressure. It's like, if you behave like that, you're gonna go to heaven. You're gonna go to hell. You really need to think: do you want to go to hell or do you want to go to heaven? Whereas threatening Baptists, it's like, hey, you better learn this because your ass is grass and God's going to be the lawnmower.
The Catholic approach is we built all for your salvation. Do you see that man bleeding up there? That blood was for you. But I guess that's not good enough for you.
Yeah, and you got to drink it and eat his flesh, even though its flesh tastes suspiciously like a wafer.
It does. The difference in Catholic and Jewish guilt is this. In Jewish guilt, it's all about the guilter not being good enough. I worked all day on this soup, but it's just not good enough for your highfalutin tastes. Oh, well, I guess I'll try and do better next time. I know you bet refined things. Whereas Catholic guilt is I worked all day, the finest ingredients, and you can't even be to the table on time. It's all about the guilty not being good enough rather than the guilter not being good enough.
You know who the only person to escape 1970 parallel time was other than Barnabas?
Listen, all. Who is it?
Victoria Winters. No. In my opinion, at least. That's why you don't see or hear of her. Here's the thing, too, with 1970 parallel time. We always know that Quentin or some variation of him or people around Quentin seem to dabble in the occult. I think it's natural to think that there's things going on in the house, or just the people are that paranoid of things going on in the house because, hey, there was a death in the house, Angelique's. And, was it murder? Wasn't it? Who knows? Some people believe she was murdered. Some people, don't care. Like her husband seems to not give a shit, which is eyebrow raising in a sense. It's why, again, he's a sus. And to my mind, again, David Selby and the writers made Quentin the easiest number one suspect. Think about this. You have a husband who his wife just dies in a seance, and then he goes off, gets remarried, comes back home, and, talk to Alexis, but everything Alexis does pisses him off because why? You're wearing Angelique's clothes. I don't like it. Anything containing Angelique, he hates. And it's just like, dude, did you love your wife at all? Or at all? God, I know, like, when my wife leaves the house, I make her call me when she gets to work. Or I'll call her if she hasn't called me in enough time passes by.
What do you think she's doing out there?
She's going to work. Still.
Very lovely.
Well, here's the thing too. Like where she works, Donegal Sheets gas station. There's a dead zone. Like you can't call her and she can't call me. So I try to wait till she gets sort to call her, and then her cell phone will ring. Like if I tried to call her, it probably wouldn't go through because there's a dead zone going through that area. But with Dark Shadows, again, it's just easy for Quentin to be the suspect because he does so many suspect things. And then, like you guys have said, and I agree, he is the monster of this story. And really, he presents himself as the monster of this story.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind, and it's an actual psychological phenomenon, is that Quentin may be engaging in splitting, which is with people with some personality disorders. Like most people, you can see the good and the bad at the same time, and you can kind of see that there's a mix of, I like them, but they can be a pain in the ass. But with splitting, they're either all good or all bad. And I think with Quentin, he's doing that with Angelique. It's like, okay, he married her at some point because he loved her, but she's sneaking. Now he hates her because she's sneaking around. She's done all this stuff. She ate the cheesecake. He left that cheesecake for her. Gave Trask orders not to let anyone eat it. But did she listen? No. And I think at this point, I think it may be a question of he's moved towards hate, hate, hate. And at this point, it's like when he brings Maggie in, it's, obviously he loves her, but when we see that his personality is starting to assert itself and he's becoming more comfortable with being a dick. And so I think that with Angelique, it's like he went from, I can understand him going there because psychologically he has to do that. Because that means, okay, he doesn't have to take any responsibility. It's all on her.
Patrick?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you, Gordon and Patrick. Is he more Harvey Dent Two-Face, or is he more Jack Torrance?
I don't know if he's either, I guess. Harvey Dent, because those things are coming from within. Jack Torrance is a substance user who is victimized by ghosts.
Yeah.
And who's basically, I guess they see that as a way of getting into his weaknesses.
Yeah.
See, I don't know if I'd compare him with either, because with Two-Face, it's a duality. It's an either or. I think with Jack Torrance, it's, since King wrote that book as a metaphor for his own alcoholism, I'm not sure. I think I'm trying to think of a.
It's a metaphor for Pat Sajak on the most recent episodes of Wheel of Fortune.
Oh yeah, so see, there you go. I'm trying to think of a. I think he's. I think whatever. I think something seriously. Okay, looking at growing up in the Collins household, if we assume that history, the only thing that's changed is that Barnabas and Josette got married and left.
No.
The fact that Barnabas not only, it seems like there's been no contact at all for about 200 years. And even if we say that all the same family members are there that are in the prime timeline, and that's the only thing that's changed, what we see is you've got a lot of, Joshua is not exactly father of the year. And he probably brought Daniel and Melanie in. I'm not sure if that's the right character, but he brought Daniel in as a substitute son. And we're assuming that like Jeremiah bolted. Sarah still died, but for other causes. You've got a kid coming from another family who's getting all that trauma and all that stuff placed on him. He's not going to be a good dad. He's raising, that gets transmitted to Edward and Quentin, who this 1897, maybe he's not he's probably even harder drinking and harder hell raising because he doesn't, let's assume, we can assume that, hey, he leaves Jenny and there's no consequence, no werewolf curse, no painting, but he has kid, or he marries Jenny, but he transmits all that stuff to Quentin's father, and then Quentin, and then Chris and Amy, and and Quentin's also dealing with, I'm assuming in this timeline they're not obviously his descendants, but they're like his cousins. So he's dealing with, when you're dealing with a lot of family dysfunction that's put on you, and you don't have any outside contact or any idea of what normal is, you're gonna be a malevolent. You're just gonna be evil, and you're gonna be very flawed and very nasty. I am not defending Quentin Parallel Time 1970, but I've grown up with people, including my own dad, who could be nasty and vicious. They'd have a softer side, but you rarely saw it because it was an inability to deal with his own stuff. I mean, at least Prime Universe Quentin, you see him actually grow into, he's never really a good man the way Barnabas is kind of leaning towards and where he's striving, but you at least see that Quentin is like starting to get his stuff together. And when you're a werewolf and you're an immortal, you need to get your stuff together because you're going to be around a while.
I concur.
With this episode, you also have Cyrus Longworth, who's in there, Christopher Pennock. How great is Christopher Pennock as Cyrus Longworth and John Yeager?
He's marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's, in my opinion, he's the best Jekyll and Hyde we've ever seen in history. I'll debate that with.
And you've never seen the night you really on Tubi. There's a 1969 version with Jack Palance, directed by Dan Curtis.
I've seen it.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it. I like Jack Palance, great actor. But when you take somebody like Christopher Pennock and have him do it, and he's playing this scientist, and then it was done better on television than it was with Jack. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Jack Palance, but I've seen Jack Palance play heels before. There's this little movie called Shane.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it too, but I do think I don't want to take away because I'm not saying he's bad at it, but I think with Jekyll and Hyde, it's actually a much more complicated story than most adaptations make it to be, because for one thing, it starts off that usually most adaptations do with, like, Jekyll is the small man and Hyde is like this big brooding beast.
Yeah.
In the book, it's actually quite different. It's reversed. Jekyll is kind of like the healthy, sturdy, get out and do stuff. And when Hyde emerges, he's small. But over the course of the book, Hyde gets bigger and Jekyll diminishes.
Frederick March brings that out.
Yeah, and that's one you should see. I would say that's better than Chris Pennock's.
Oh, it's very different. Chris Pennock. Let's give him the benefit of this.
Yeah,
he ain't playing Henry Jackson, and he's not playing Edward Hyde.
Right.
The beauty is that he's playing John Yeager, and he's playing John Yeager, and he's playing Cyrus Longworth, and that not only is the name difference important just for branding purposes, so it does tell us Jekyll and Hyde like.
Yeah.
But we as a production company are free from too many comparisons, because if we had wanted to call him Jekyll and Hyde, at this point we have the scratch, we could have done it. So I think one of the things that happened around this time in terms of the whole duality, jazz, is Richard Matheson.
Mm-hmm.
And an episode of Star Trek that, if someone wanted to make an argument that just from an essential human truth department kind of level, that Matheson's episode of Star Trek, The Enemy Within, is maybe the best episode of the original series. It certainly is right up there, because, before we were dealing with this very Victorian notion of a complete duality. What Matheson did that I think was so great is that even though they still sort of used the labels good and evil, because that's what they had, he was talking about the fact that the integrated psyche needs both. And that once you have that notion floating around, and I think because Matthew Hall was a kid, he was probably watching Trek, and Sam was home, and Sam saw The Enemy Within, and that had a lot of influence on there. Because he's not just evil. Cyrus Longworth is much more complicated than that. Yeah. If anything, he's just a human turned up to 11. One of the things we don't see very often is we don't see Cyrus getting positive feedback. We don't see him in a place where things go well for him. Instead, the writers kind of stack the deck, and he is opposed again and again and again. My feeling is that if Cyrus happened to find a gal who liked mustaches, bad wigs, he would be the happiest friend you could possibly have. He would be hugely generous because I think Cyrus is just a guy who has all of the brakes taken off. He is Bluto from Animal House to the nth degree. And that really changes things, and it allows Chris Pennock to do extraordinary work, and I think seek some things out that have not been thoroughly explored before or since.
Yeah. Also, with John Yeager, when he knows, he makes the conscious decision to call Barnabas and tell him where Maggie is, that Barnabas needs to get there, and that's his last act of Cyrus Longworth. But it's one he chooses to do as Cyrus because he knows he needs to stop John Yeager in every way. Cyrus Longworth, yes, he's responsible for creating Yeager, but he's just as responsible for stopping him as well.
Mhm.
Which is really cool. What did you guys think of Jerry Lacey in this episode?
He's fine. I think it was a job this day that probably required a little more thinking and calculation on his part and less expenditure of energy. I'm not sure it was as much fun, but this was an episode where he was definitely showing all of his work on the exam.
Yeah, and I think too, what could have been just like a simple, you go in, you do your job, you get your check, you leave. He really does underscore some of the. He does underscore the kind of menace that's going on, because he could have really played it as, okay, he could have come, said his lines, not bump into the furniture, and do it. I think he helps give it that little lift and suggests that, yeah, this is the Trask that we know from the other timeline, except in this one, somehow they're not the equal. And maybe the difference is that the three Trask, his forebears, his male forebears actually lived and had nothing to do, didn't die at the hand of the Collinses.
Oh,
where
yeah, this is a very different universe. And yeah.
1970 parallel time is a fun trip. It is not the 1970 that we know and love, but that's what makes it special.
Yeah. My assumption Orville Trask was basically the Ben Stokes of that era. And that maybe Ben Stokes was doing something a little more executive, which is why, and his kids their great grandkids doing okay, except that he's sleazy and evil.
I know,
or maybe in this universe, before Barnabas left for England, Ben was like, "Hey, take me with you," and Barnabas was like, "Yeah, pound sand, dude. I don't want you anywhere near me."
It could be.
I know he's not in this episode, but what did you guys think of Michael Stroka's Bruno?
Wonderful hair.
It's Michael Stroka. So it's Michael at this point has learned how to succeed in shadows without really stretching, and that's okay because the scripts aren't asking him to. It's basically the script just keep writing the Michael Stroka character. I think that's not a positive thing for Michael. It's not that he earned less. I mean, I wish Dark Shadow's been on for a few more years for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, what do they do with Michael's ensemble to give him something different to play? Pennock got to play all kinds of stuff. He never really gets that. He's always going to be a sleazy fop.
Have him play a magician who solves crimes. That was brilliant in deduction. Anyway.
Actually, piggybacking on one of our previous episodes, you make him the occult detective character.
Yeah. And I think I like the character Bruno. I like the fact he's another character who has a crush on Angelique. but he's very out in the open. He's very confrontational with Quentin. I like the buttons he pushes with characters. It's really fun when he's on screen. And there are times he worries, though, to the character. And the ode to Angelique, he gets to play it on the piano, which is a lot of fun to watch him do. So, overall, what did you guys think of this episode?
Good episode. It's nice. It's suspenseful. There are surprises, and there's a good punchy ending that makes me want to tune in the next day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really shows Dark Shadows at its best because there really isn't a bad note in it. You know, there's no. Sometimes with some episodes, you can tell when a person is dry and can't remember their line, or there's a plot line that doesn't quite work the way you think it would. But this is just it's pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree.
Overall, really enjoyable episode. I like the fact that you get a lot of before they send off the character, you get a lot of Alexis in the episode. And Alexis, before she, the cliffhanger at the end, she realizes that, okay, these people have been very nice to me. Maybe it's I've done a lot of taking. Maybe it's time I give back. And though giving back is going to cost her life in every way. Really, really good episode, guys. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
This has been. What's next?
Well, we're gonna do random episodes, so it's your turn to pick, Patrick.
Oh, June. I thought it was your. I picked the whole week.
You picked the whole week. Oh yeah. It's
Mine-
Gordon. It's Gordon's turn now.
Gordon's.
Okay. Yeah, I'm tempted to say 100 just to rag on the Penn episode a little more, but that would just be cruel. You know what? Let's do episode 1102.
There you go. Let's see. Is Tuesday at 11 good, guys?
Yes.
Tuesday. Okay, so Tuesday at 11, we're going to do another episode. So I see you guys Tuesday night. You guys have a great, great, and safe night.
Yeah. Peace.
Good night.